Welcome everybody here for our last and final interview in honor of International Women's Day. So at Abundance Academy, I have been interviewing successful women all week long, and we have been talking about money. We have had some incredibly beautiful conversations, candid conversations about what people have observed, about what these leaders have observed regarding money, their relationship with money, and how it truly does impact their business. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Larissa McCook. I'm author of the upcoming Stop Procrastinating Your Life Away, Discover the Secrets to More Time, Money, and Freedom, and CEO here at Abundance Academy, where we work with professional women whose external results tell the world they're successful, and on the inside, they know they're destined for more, and they want to stop holding themselves back and truly, truly go after their dreams so they can love themselves, love their business, and love their lives, and just have so much more magic than they have now. And today, my very, very special guest is Tara Kanerva, and she is a reclamation coach. And she is just absolutely incredible. I have worked with her and I've known her for several years. I have so many colleagues that have worked with her. Her and her husband have an incredible coaching practice out in Guelph. And what's really unique about Tara is she doesn't just coach. She walks her talk. She gets coached. She teaches coaching. She studies with many different people. When I was talking to her, she's like, I've got so much education. It's coming out of every pore of my body. She just keeps learning. She has got a thirst for knowledge. So I absolutely love and adore her. And what's really cool about Tara is she takes theoretical knowledge that's super complicated and just boils it down to simple, simple things that are truly relevant and accessible to all. She also works with coaches to help them overcome their greatest challenges. So she actually does like basic coaching for people that work with others, because even as coaches, we all have our own stuff, and you really can't read the label from inside the bottle. So in her spare time, Tara loves to hang with her kids. And anytime you have animals, bring them over, because she has her own small zoo. She loves retreats, loves books, and just likes hanging around women and truly creating magic. So Tara, I'm so happy that you're here and like gracing us with your incredible smile.
Thank you, Larissa. That was so sweet. That was so kind. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this. This is such a great idea for you to be able to share this with people. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So can you, I know I've said my own interpretation of what you do, but can you just briefly tell people what it is that you do and how you work with people?
Yes. So I'm an NLP coach, and I've been doing this type of coaching for the last 8 years. But what led me here was actually doing birth work. So I have, as you were stating before, I spent a lot of time in my late teens and my early 20s in academia. I did a master's degree really young, and then I did a ton of traveling. I was a humanitarian worker, came back and did some more education. And once I had my own children, I ended up with a really, really strong passion for birth work. So I had traveled around the world, and I had seen a lot of different approaches to things. And so when I had my second child, I decided that I was going to use some of these different approaches toward birth. And when I did so, it blew my mind. Like, I just couldn't believe the difference in the experience that I had. And so I got pretty revved up, and one of the things that I did was get myself trained as a doula, and I trained as a coach. And so throughout that process, I ended up having coaching skills, but I really faced difficulties with things like working with women who had, say, a phobia of a needle or a hospital or some aspect of their birth that was actually going to cause difficulty for them and potentially have an outcome that they didn't want. And I didn't feel like I had the skills and the ability to be able to help those women through those problems. And so what I ended up doing, I'm just going to turn this, and then we won't get the, there, that should help us. So I ended up.
Okay, Tara, I cannot hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. Okay. I'm going to.
We had a little technical difficulties hopping on here before.
But now it's okay?
I think so. I know, Maylin, you're listening. So if you could just let us know, how is the audio happening? How is the audio? Let's see. Well, one day we'll all have like a beautiful studio and a full tech team, okay?
One of these days. I will just quickly check here. It does look like it's working okay on my end, so hopefully it's okay. Oh,
Okay,
they
she
hear okay.
says,
Okay, good.
I hear you. Okay, perfect.
Excellent. Okay.
All right, beautiful.
Yeah, so my journey led me to realizing that I needed some different skills to be able to help these women with birth, which is where I found myself in my first NLP practitioner course, learning how to use these skills to be able to help women through their process of birth. And it blew my mind. It just ended up being for me like a life-changing experience. And from there, I realized that I wasn't going to just be working with women who were dealing with birth. I was going to have to take this skill further. And I very, very quickly ended up with women who are dealing with all sorts of things in life. And that's really how I got going. And so my husband and I, he also trained in NLP. He did many, many years ago. And we started an NLP center in Guelph. We now have an institute where we train and we teach and we coach. And it's been pretty amazing.
I love it. I love it. And now I know you focus on so many other aspects of people's lives. You're not a money coach. However, I know that money does come up in everybody's life, right? We all have money stories. We all have relationships to money. And just like anything, our relationship to money comes from a long, long time ago. It comes from our paradigms, from our parents, from our caregivers, from those that we grew up with, from the things that we observed. And I'm sure you've had the opportunity to observe money stories from your clients and from those you've worked with, from the students that you've taught. So can you share what you've actually observed when it comes to people's money story, especially for women, and how it plays out in your line of work?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So, you know what's one of the most interesting things that I noticed early on was it's really essential that we do values work. So, values work, just to make this very, very brief, values work means that we're looking at what is most important to people so that they can be in alignment with what is both consciously and unconsciously most important to them. So, as we go through the process of looking at people's values, sometimes it's really, really fascinating to people that they realize that they're actually, if we took a day of their life, so if we were to actually, I've just gotten a message as a reload here. Did you get this? No.
No, I
Okay.
don't have a
Mine
message.
just said something went wrong. We have to reload.
Okay.
So we'll see. What was that you said earlier? Mercury retrograde?
Mercury retrograde. Yeah, the best excuse for technical difficulties, except it doesn't start till April.
Oh no. Right. So when we align people's values, people get really surprised. They'll come back to me and they'll say, you know what, Tara, I didn't even realize it. But when they do an audit of their day, so when they actually look at how they're spending their time, their money, their energy, they realize that they're not living in alignment with any of their values. And that can create like a deep, sort of unexplained lack of fulfillment or joy. Or whatever it may be. And so I always work with people's values. And what's really interesting is that because our values are very unconscious, a lot of them we don't know why we're making the decisions that we're making toward one thing or another, but it's a reflection of our values. And back in the day, I used to work with men, and I found that whether I was working with a man or a woman, men would have no problem always if I said either life values or career values. Money or whatever their version of saying money, so it may be income or, financial stability or whatever the case may be,
Mhm.
their version of it would be right up in, like, the top 4 or 5, right? So they might say something like family, success, money, or, family, my passion, bringing in a stable income. And so it was always right up there in the top values. With women, though, it was extraordinary. I was working with successful women. I mean, I was working with women who lived with, they lived in houses, their kids were well provided for. Money had obviously been a great contribution to living the life that they wanted to live. And yet, when I asked them about their values, either in life or in career, most often I would get down to like value number 10, 11, 12, and still money wasn't showing up as a value, to the point where very often, I'd say maybe half of the time, 50% of the time, women wouldn't even have money as a value, right?
So
And
it's not
so
even in their awareness. Like they just can't see it. So it's not
a
even in the realm of possibility.
Totally. And normally when I would suggest to them then, so they would go through and I would say, so if you had all of these things in life, you'd be happy, you wouldn't need anything else. And they go, yeah, no, I don't need anything else. And then I would suggest to them and say, well, what about money? If you had all these things, but you had no money, would you be okay? And they go, well, no, but then there's a qualifier, but I don't really value money per se. Like I don't, it's the things. And there was this big explanation so that they could avoid actually having to consciously say that they value money. And it was very, very interesting because it was almost as though there was like a shame associated to it, or it would devalue them, in their authenticity or something if there was money listed as a value. And so we would always have to do the work, right? We would always have to, go through the work of reframing, understanding that money is a big contributing factor to their health, to their happiness, and that it's okay for money to be a value. And then we would actually in NLP, the beauty, of course, is that we can shift values around. And that's what we would do.
I love that. I think that's so powerful. And I love that you brought that up because it's a really different perspective from what so many of the other speakers have shared. And I think it's so important because, I mean, the values work I've done, I have seen this in classes of students, right? Especially when you're in class and you've got 10 people getting their values elicited and nobody's got money on there. And they're like, oh, I wonder why things aren't working in business or with clients, because it's not even in the realm of possibilities. And I think this is one reason I want to normalize the conversation about money, because one common thing is that most women they don't think of talking about money. It's not part of the everyday conversation. For men, they ask about financial things. They talk about investing. They expect to discuss financial concepts with one another. It's part of the natural and normal conversation. However, it's women talk about kids, women talk about breastfeeding, women talk about activities. They ask how much certain things cost, but beyond how much an activity for your kid costs, women don't generally speak about money.
Yeah, it's very
And
interesting.
and like you said, and when it comes to values, it's because it's not even in their awareness. So I really love that because I think it's so powerful. And the values, they're unconscious. You don't have them in your awareness until you choose to bring them in. And
That's
so
right.
how would you approach women who may not be comfortable talking about money, or let's say maybe someone that doesn't have the privilege of jumping into your Zoom room or into your office yet?
So let me tell you a little story because I think that this is really it's so important. I agree with everything that you're saying, and uh, because it's been an issue for me. So when I say, I used to do this work with women on their values, the reason that I became so in attuned to make sure that I did this is because of my own work through it. So as I mentioned before, I did a master's degree very, very young. So it put me on the road. It put me like I was out in the Middle East, and then I was in Asia, and I was all over the place. And I was working with humanitarian organizations. So I was in a kind of work where, I don't even know what I got paid. I basically got paid enough to like survive. I was single. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. So really, if I could feed myself and stay sheltered, then I was, okay. And so I went into this work and I was working in really, really difficult situations. I mean, I was like in the middle of Africa working, with orphans and, so around me is abject poverty and all the things that are surrounded by it. So as a humanitarian worker, one of the things that you really learn, right? You get conditioned to learn, or you already have it and it kind of amplifies, is to really devalue money and in fact, even vilify money, right? So there is definitely this sense of like the good people do charity work and the bad people profit. So there's this very strong narrative. And so when I came to I did that for a decade, had my own children. Now I really wanted to do this work and I recognized just how important it was that what I could do. I was immediately aware that I had like a calling for this. This was definitely the work I was meant to do in the world. And I did it for a number of months, and I called my own coach and said, "Okay, listen, I think I do this well. Like, I really think that and this is the career that I want to have. I seem to be making great impact. Problem is, I'm not making any money. And if I don't make money soon, I'm not going to be able to continue to do this and help anyone." And so, we uncovered, of course, my value was way down there, but it was because of this, like, this actual disdain that I had. So the relationship that I had with money was that if I was to go after money, there would be something very, like, very maladjusted in terms of my understanding of what that meant, my own meaning. And so the reframing of that for me, so getting to the point where I had to actually adjust it in my values, and I'm telling you, it went from, like, value number 15, that I was starting my own business. You and I understand how imperative it is that, like, if I had not adjusted my relationship to money, I would not be doing this today. There are hundreds of people that I have helped, more than that, and people that we have trained that would not have been had I not been able to change that relationship with money. And so for me, it was a really, it was efficient because I was using NLP, so it was fast, but it was deep. Like, it was this really deep undoing of, like, no, there was never anything wrong with money. There's something wrong with some people who abuse the money that they have, or there's something wrong with being, greedy around things, or being uncaring or ungenerous, or, like, there are problems in people's attitudes, absolutely. But that is a separate thing entirely from money, which is just this objective, functional thing that we all need to develop our own relationship. And if I want to do what I do, and I had to do a lot of reframing around, like, people spend money on, like, a weekend away, and because they see the value in it. And so when I'm coaching them and I'm doing this, it's okay to ask for money, to ask for the type of money that matches what I'm able to do for them. And so when we moved it up in my values, knowing that I needed to, at this point, really dynamically, drastically change things, it allowed me to actually come in and have that kind of respect. I always use the word respect because I think I was very disrespectful of it. I had entangled it with people's use of it instead of, like, leaving it as it was. And so when I did that, that allowed me then to actually be able to say to a client, "Hey, you know what? I do this and I charge for it." And I wouldn't, like, I wouldn't break into a sweat and feel like I was, like, a bad person for asking them to write me a check. And instead, because of the shift in the values, I was able to then say, "Okay, this is what I charge," and to feel really, really powerful and, all the things that were most important to me, compassionate and kind and caring as I did it.
So Maitland's asking, what is NLP? So NLP is
Uh-huh.
neuro linguistic programming. But for those viewers and listeners that don't know what NLP is, can you just give them a brief definition of
For
what
sure.
it is? I mean, other than magical, what's the other way of approaching it?
Yeah. So NLP is a way of working with our neurology. So most coaching is really focused on our behavior and on the narratives as we understand them, the meaning, that sort of thing, which is important also to change, but it's difficult to change your conscious mind. So if you were to imagine that your brain is 90 or 95% of your brain is actually unconscious, it's the automatic part of your brain. And then you have this very small portion that is actually conscious. And so most coaching and most traditional ways of sort of talk therapy or traditional coaching, they're working with everything that's sort of what we would a metaphor of, like, the tip of the iceberg. So that's the part that we in our thinking cognitive brains associate with us being awake and aware and having choice. But the truth is all of our feelings, all of our thoughts, all of our somatic responses, everything about us is actually generated from everything that is below the water. And so NLP works with that part that is below, and we get it congruent with the behaviors and the actions. So NLP is about going into your unconscious mind and rewiring the meaning that you have with everything in life. So it could simply be, like, a really quick example is, like, if I say to you, everybody, just imagine a teapot. in your mind, unbeknownst to you, you're gonna have an image of a teapot that comes up because your brain has to. It has to sort of figure out the meaning of it, and you normally aren't aware of that. You just carry on. You would say, "Yeah, I know what a teapot is," and you carry on, and you're not paying conscious attention to the fact that it's actually in your brain as a representation. But if you happen to have, say, a very negative relationship with teapots for some strange reason, it's going to go back to this, like, automatically generated image and meaning and feeling and everything else that you have with this teapot, and that can be adjusted. And so it's a very unique way of being able to go into the brain and to find those associations and those meanings and change them at the deepest level, at the unconscious level. And because we're not working with the conscious mind, the part, the stories and everything else, it's actually very, very efficient. It's very fast because we're just adjusting things and then rewiring them in a way that better serves you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Thank you. Now, what do you think are some of the what are some of the greatest challenges that women face when it comes to money, just in general?
Feeling as though it's something that is has virtue. So I think that for women, it is so important for so many women, whether it's conditioning or nature or who cares. It's just, I think women have a real struggle to be able to vocalize, as you've said, and I know you've been talking all week about it so articulately, but to really feel like they can be virtuous like that, and I mean that in its greatest sort of grandeur of the meaning of virtue, of like goodness and dignity and all of the things associated with that, and still value money, and to shake off any sense of like greed or selfishness or any of those, associations, and just proudly be able to say, no, money is something that I really, really find to be an important aspect of how I want to see myself reflected. And that is tough for women to do.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I love that. And what would you personally say some of your emotions have been as you've encountered the different experiences you've had with money? What are some of the emotional experiences you've had over the years?
Such an interesting question. Okay. So, in the beginning, like I told you, it was a real struggle to value money, and I did. And then I got my head around like, wow, this is exciting. And then the thrill, like the actual thrill, I would say the emotion of like just being wildly amazed that I could be doing this work that I loved so much. Like I love coaching. Like for the last 8 years having the privilege to I know people say this all the time, but I really feel it in my bones that like, holy shit, this is like exactly what I want to do. And they'll pay me to do it. So I think initially it was that thrill of like, what a wild, having been brought up in a very different environment where I thought I would be an employee of somebody for the rest of my life. And at 32 years old, 34 years old, actually, flipping that around and being like, what? I get to decide? Like, I get to decide how much money I want to make and how much I charge for what I do and all that kind of stuff. So there was absolutely a thrill of this is exciting. Followed very quickly by like, oh no. There is also a tremendous amount of responsibility now to show up, like to really show up and to stay confident. And then, so I think there was like some fear, some pretty strong fear at different points in like, can I keep doing this? Is it going to last? Like, when you're starting out with any business, I think there's that sense of like, we did really well. I mean, I did really well. My husband and I did really well right out of the gate. And so it felt great. But I definitely had a sense of like, okay, are we getting ahead of the curve, so that fear element and surprise, I think, at how other people value money. So I think that there was a real, I was really learning about how for some people, money was something that was just, they were so tapped into it, like energetically, they were so tapped into money that they would just immediately do that. Like, yep, I see the value. So tell me the price and I'm going to pay it. Even if it was a stretch, right? It didn't, there wasn't a direct relationship to like how much money they made. They would just pay it, and then noticing that other people couldn't do that, right? Other people just couldn't let money be something that easily. They had to struggle with it, and so recognizing that I step away from that and let people, have their own relationship until they ask for help around it. So
Mhm.
then finally, just the ongoing staying tapped in, I guess, is the best
Mhm.
way. The emotion of like having to really really, really respect money and know that it requires attention. And that's the part that sort of took me by surprise in the last couple of years.
Cool. I love that. And I love how clearly you had this visual, because I think we can all relate to the roller coaster of emotions. And one of the things I don't think a lot of people think about is they think, if I just earn a lot more money, all my problems will be solved. If I just win the lottery, all my problems will be solved. However, that's like the last thing you want to think about. You want to really look at the relationship you have with money and be able to go through this ebb and flow, and just recognize where you're at. And when you raise your awareness through talks like this, through just making a decision to actually check what your financial situation is. Like, there are some people I talk to and I'm like, have you tracked how much money you have coming in, going out, and what your net worth is? And they're just like, like you said, starting to sweat, just and total panic. And it doesn't have to be that way. Yet, as soon as they sit down and do it, regardless of what the number is, whether it's better or worse or different than they expected, or maybe they just had no clue, at
Yeah.
least they know and they can move forward from there. Because often say, I
So
want to be up
important.
here, but if you don't know where you're starting from, you can't start putting the steps in place. Like when you're in a GPS, when you're programming the GPS, you need to know the destination. You need to know where you're at, or you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to kind of like walk around the block and hope you
And
get.
you know what, Larissa, that's probably most of the work that I do is just giving people the chance to get over that fear of recognizing where they are. So when I'm working with women who are either, whether they're partnered or not, so whether they have like singular control over their income or whether they have sort of this like combined partner that they have money responsibilities with. But I would say a lot of the work that I do is getting them over the fear of just being able to look at where they are realistically. And you couldn't be more right in terms of like, it's, I'll say this quickly, but it's really, really connected to anxiety, right? Because with anxiety, there are three elements of anxiety. You're out in the future, you're anticipating a negative outcome, and then you're assuming you can't handle it. So in order to have anxiety, and in NLP, we always use the term of you're doing anxiety. Anxiety is not happening to you. You have to generate it. It's just doing there. So there's the stimulus out there. So the stimulus may be like the bank account is looking low, or I don't know what to charge, or whatever the case may be. So there's a stimulus of money out there, and you immediately get this sense of anxiety. And what people, if they could just recognize that ultimately what they're doing is they're doing anxiety to themselves. So they're out in the future imagining like, what is going to happen if I don't have money, essentially, right? So just by, in some cases, come back from the future, like settle down, just stay where you are. You're okay today. Just stay focused on what you're doing.
Mhm.
Tap into some trust that if you're better off to stay here now doing what you do best than to go out in the future and waste your time imagining this fictional thing that hasn't happened yet. And so sometimes that's it. But then, of course, the second piece of anxiety in order to do it is that you have to be imagining a negative outcome. So when people look at that bank balance, or they look at, that they only have, this many people registered for their workshop and it's not enough, and whatever the case may be, they're going out there and in order to be able to generate that anxiety, they have to be imagining that it's going to be very negative, and they don't take the time to imagine, well, what if, all the positive possibilities. And then finally, they have to imagine they can't handle it. And as you say, the truth is, if they just sit down and actually start going through, what is it that I can do to mitigate whatever may happen? And 99% of the time, you realize you can handle it just fine. You just needed to know. And the anxiety just goes away. And now they can face whatever they have to in terms of money and get remotivated toward making money instead of worrying about it.
Yay, I love that. I think that's so powerful. And I mean, we could probably talk for hours. I don't think we'd have a problem with that, because I know you're a wealth of knowledge. But just for the sake of time, I've got two more questions for you. What changes would you like to see in the way we talk about money, in the way women talk about money, in the conversation women are willing to have around money?
I would like to see I would like to see women being able to have a bigger language around their interpretation of money so that they didn't feel like they first had to um, do like a techno rational explanation of how they're not materialistic, how they're not really money oriented. Because women always, not always, I should never say always, many women sometimes feel like they have to do this big qualifier to first assure the audience, whoever it is, whether it's one person or many, that they're not like money hungry. And then they can go into their conversations or relationship with money. And I wish they didn't have to do that. I wish that women were getting into discussions or conversations about what they want for themselves, what they want for their families, what they want for their company, what they want for their legacy without having to first qualify and beg for people to not see them, and project that whole idea out there. So that's one conversation that I really wish. And the other is just that we could talk more about all the positive outcomes of money and whatever beliefs you have to really, really engage in. Like, I wonder why we have these negative connotations sometimes and this fear associated to it, and explore those in an open way, as you say, like with other women, where I think there would be so much compassion and so much shared experience that just doesn't get experienced.
Yeah, and I love how you said that because I remember there was a point where I loved money. I thought it was fun. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was entertaining. I had ups and downs with different aspects of my relationship. However, I never thought there was a problem having money or working towards money. And then I started meeting people that would judge me and they would say I'm money hungry and I felt really inadequate. And so just like you're saying, I did start qualifying. And until you were just talking at the end to have you mentioned it earlier, but until you just shared it at the end, I didn't recognize that that's exactly what I was doing. Right. And
Yeah.
that's, thank you for just pointing that out because
Yeah.
I think it's better. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm really going to pay attention to that because I remember there was a distinct point where there was a couple people that really did judge me and have those side comments. And then all of a sudden I remember starting to say, well, it's not just for the money. And I'm like,
That's right.
well, what if it's okay to just have money? What if it's
That's
okay
right.
to just have it because you have it
That's
without
right.
even having to explain what you're going to do with it or who you're going to give it to or how it's going to be used? Because uh, one of my favorite authors, Wallace D. Wattles, he says abundance is our birthright. And when it
Yeah.
comes to that, that means we deserve to have an abundance of beautiful emotions, beautiful experiences, money, healthy food,
Yeah.
just a beautiful life in all aspects. And one of the things I love about Gay Hendricks in his Big Leap, he says, like, what if you could just feel good all the time?
Yeah.
What if what if it was actually possible to just feel good and you didn't have to feel bad? Like, and even to entertain that possibility, I don't think a lot of us have thought of that. What if we could just always feel good? What if we could just always have money coming in? What if we could just always earn more money? What if we could always ask for more money and not have to justify it? And it just is what it is because
Yeah.
money is a tool. Money is energy. And I've been saying, like, your relationship with money is a direct reflection of your relationship with yourself. And it really is. And it's not the only aspect. However, it is one really important aspect. And so I love what you shared. And I think it's so powerful and so key. So do you have any final words to share? Any final thoughts before we pause?
Just that I think that what you're doing is so important because I do think it's something that we have a lot of trouble to put language around. And as women, those qualifiers that we put out there just continue to enable the idea that you have to somehow explain or justify your desire to have it. When, as you say, I think that if we got more of a sense around us of like, this is how it should be. And if your concern is that, like, you want more people in the world to be able to experience abundance, then you have every right in the world to go do that, right? To go make sure that you're getting engaged and involved in the things that really support and help others. And if that's what is of one of your top values, then go ahead and do that, but don't attach it to this explanation or justification of why you yourself are seeking and trying to achieve abundance. And that would be such an exciting place for us all to work. And I think, as you say, it would just kind of raise the vibration of everybody where we could all really start to value each other and use money as something that as it should be, like as it was meant to be, which is an exchange, as opposed to something that holds all sorts of, meaning that isn't real. And let's just go back to where this is an exchange. And so the amount of energy you put out and the amount of energy you get back, there's a relationship there that is really important to clean up. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me. This has been an absolute pleasure having you here. I am sure I'm going to find an extra reason to have you back again, because I know everyone can learn so much from you. And if anyone wants to learn more about you, I know you work with coaches, but are you open to working with with other women as well?
Oh yeah, I still work with everybody.
Okay,
My
still work with
area
everyone.
specialties there, but I work with everyone.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you're someone and you're a nice lady, you only work with nice people, right?
Only.
You gotta love Tara. But if you love her energy and are interested in learning more about her and her practice, whether you're a coach or just a beautiful woman, where can they find you? How is the best way to?
They can just find me at tarakanerva.com. So it's just my name.com. Or if you're interested in NLP and even more of what we do, our website is inspiredoutcomes.ca. And there's lots of stuff there for you. I'd love to.
I am putting that in the chat. Inspiredoutcomes.ca. There we go. Okay. So I know some of the streams have gotten it. And if you have not received that, the URLs, we'll make sure to post it in the channel as well. So if any of you are watching and you would like to learn more about your relationship with money and really start improving your money mindset, I am hosting the Master Your Money Mindset Masterclass. And we've held 3 of them already. They have been absolutely phenomenal. We are talking about why your money truths are a lie. We're looking at how your money programs came to be and how you can profit in any economy. So best of all, this masterclass is absolutely free. So come join me for a couple hours. I do have registration that's limited because I like to see who's in my class. So make sure to save your seat before it's gone. We've got 2 more dates, one on November 22nd and one more on April 1st. And I am just going to pop the registration link in the chat as well. So it would be an absolute pleasure to see you there. And thank you again, Tara. It has been so phenomenal. I think I have like 12,000 more ideas for future possible episodes. So.
I love it.